and welcome to our annual Howard Thurman Crown Forum. 126 years ago, Howard Thurman appeared in this world, 1899. He came to Morehouse in 1919. He graduated in 1923. And he ascended from this life in 1981. He had a serious concern about collegiate education, college education in historically black colleges in particular. And so he emphasized living a saintly, holy life of sanctity and integrity. He was not so concerned about the public results of education as he was about the private results of education. What is your college experience doing to you? And he would very often, in addressing audiences like this, say, "All who are able, please rise." And after he got you standing and attentive, he would say, "We died, but you who live must do a harder thing than dying. For you must think, and ghost shall drive you on." You may be seated. In my 46th year as founding dean of the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel, I hold in my hands the privilege of bestowing one final $10,000 scholarship. I do so this morning with unwavering conviction for this young man about whom I will now speak, stands uniquely worthy of such distinction. This honor is not ceremonial. It is a recognition of the intellectual gravity, you might say gravitas, and moral imagination embodied by a 19-year-old of uncommon contemplative depth. His knowledge is both expansive and precise.
That's always my go-to, man.
His prose lucid and resolute. His oratorical presence unmistakably resonant. He brings to this moment a vocation already shaped by ecclesiastical devotion and academic rigor. Within the Episcopal Diocese of Atlanta, he serves under the pastoral and theological guidance of the Right Reverend Dr. Robert C. Wright, Bishop of North Georgia, and the Reverend Dr. Simon J. Maywaring of Atlanta's All Saints Episcopal Church. His churchly commitments are matched by his scholarly accent. An undergraduate research fellow at Yale University Divinity School. He will soon undertake a PhD research fellowship at the University of California, Berkeley in the ensuing summer. With a clarity of calling rare for his age, he aspires to the Master of Divinity degree at Harvard University Divinity School, and thereafter the Doctor of Philosophy degree in religion through Harvard's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. His vision fuses pastoral wisdom with philosophical inquiry and theological depth, an arc that bends toward service at Harvard's Memorial Church as a future Nathan Marsh Pusey minister, and toward the Academy as Plummer Professor of Christian Morals, Distinguished University Professor of Systematic Theology at Harvard Divinity School, and Professor of Philosophy in the college. While I delivered the 75th Marsh Chapel anniversary luncheon prayer at Boston University this past Sunday, Navion Stevens was in Harvard's Memorial Church, assisting in the worship fully robed, already inhabiting his calling with quiet fidelity. Throughout my last year as dean, so far, he has been an indispensable interlocutor, thoughtful, rigorous, and spiritually attuned. His research extends still further, shaped in part by work with the International Bonhoeffer Society under the Reverend Dr. Jennifer Bradford, bringing Navion's own reflections into dialogue with one of the 20th century's most demanding theological minds. Rooted in the living witness of historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, Atlanta, he honors the influence of a constellation of mentors who have guided his intellectual and moral formation. His parents, cardiothoracic surgeon and a serial entrepreneur, alongside Professor Elia E. Davis, the Reverend Dr. Aaron L. Parker, the Reverend Dr. Robert Michael Franklin Jr., and cherished companions Lyndon M. Young, Damari Craddock, and George W. Gatlin III. Their investment is evident in the excellence he continues to embody at Morehouse College. Beyond chapel, classroom, and church, he is sustained by the quiet virtues that nurture the contemplative life. Walking in the woods, reading that deepens the soul, writing as witness, and traveling as a sacred and intellectual widening. In every dimension, academic, philosophical, ecclesiastical, homiletical, and personal, Navion Mackay Stevens stands as a young man of rare promise, a leader whose unfolding trajectory honors the legacy of Dr. King and advances the enduring mission of Morehouse College. Therefore, by the authority vested in me as the founding dean of the chapel, I'm pleased to announce Navion Mackay Stevens, the 2025-2026 Martin Luther King Jr. Distinguished Scholar. Mr. Stevens, I call you forth to introduce our speaker for the morning, the Howard Thurman Crown Forum.
After all of that, I still have the distinguished privilege of introducing our speaker for the morning. Dr. Stacy M. Floyd Thomas is an esteemed educator and researcher focused on improving society through ethics, justice work, and faith. As the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Professor of Ethics and Society at Vanderbilt University, she passionately pursues her interest in feminist and womanist studies. Dr. Floyd Thomas believes in addressing the why crisis of faith by promoting constructive ethics and liberationist discourse. She considers the work of religious discourse and Christian faith to be inseparable from thinking about how to construct a justice-seeking community. This is exemplified in her numerous publications, including numerous articles, book chapters, and 10 books that range from Mining the Motherlode, Methods in Womanist Ethics, to U.S. Liberation Theologies, an introduction to the altars where we worship, the religious significance of popular culture, to religion, race, and COVID-19, confronting white supremacy in the pandemic, and her forthcoming manuscript, When the Good Life Goes Bad, the U.S. and its 7 Deadly Sins. As the leading womanist liberation ethics scholar, ordained minister, prolific writer, and award-winning teacher of her generation, whether you engage her through her books and articles, hear her sermons, follow her on the lecture circuit, or enroll in her classes, read her online lectionaries, or attend the many workshops and seminars she gives, it is blatantly clear, as her self-professed scholarly godfather James Cone has said, that Stacy Floyd Thomas is phenomenal, and that she is the most accessible scholar, teacher, practitioner to any woman or man of goodwill who is committed to justice-making in academy, church, and society. It is because of this reputation that she has received numerous national honors and teaching awards, not least of which is having received the honor of being J.P. Morgan Chase Woman of the Year, an American Academy of Religion Excellence in Teaching Award, as its youngest ever recipient to date. Morehouse, our esteemed featured lecturer, prides her greatest work to be the family she and her husband, Dr. Juan Floyd Thomas, a brilliant historian, having co-created in the embodiment of their daughter, Lillian Makeda Floyd Thomas. Morehouse, please welcome our speaker for the morning, the Reverend Dr. Stacy Floyd Thomas.
as Audre Lorde in 1979, the very same year Dean Carter started his professional journey here. In the decades since she made this proclamation, Lorde's urgent utterance has become best known by the title of the essay, "The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House." Now, without question, Lorde's declaration that the Master's tools will never dismantle the Master's house presents an ethical framework for interrogating the limits of moral agency and personal autonomy within systems shaped by domination. Her insight exposes a perennial question. Individuals as well as groups struggling and striving for liberation often find that the very norms, logics, vocabularies, and moral actions available to them have been forged within structures designed to constrain them from their own self-determination. Now, when the so-called tools of intellect that are critique, discipline, justice, prosperity, legitimacy, or even civility are inherited from the same oppressive systems that have historically imprisoned and enslaved us, every sense of moral agency ostensibly can become distorted and fully compromised, reduced to navigating constraints rather than transforming them. In such contexts, personal autonomy risks becoming a managed illusion, permitting only those choices that do not fundamentally threaten the existing social order. Now, while Lorde's notion of how we contend with a colonized mind, body, and soul in a battle is often interpreted as a battle cry to gain some sense of control over one's own life and destiny, I feel her critique must now be further explored for its challenge to us to discern how our ethical practices may unwittingly reproduce power dynamics, white supremacy, misogyny, xenophobia, oligarchy, heterosexism, and yes, fascism, those very things that we seek to resist. Her warning about the master's tools invite us to a deeper reckoning with the ways moral language, as well as the lives we seek to live in accordance with those values, merit, respectability, reason, neutrality, etc., can masquerade as universal while privileging the perspectives and interests of those who already have all the power. Based on her words, we need to think not only about what are the master's tools, but all the more so, who have been the master's tools. Or some may say, the master's fools. Meaning those self-professed, possessed, delusional exceptionalists who have erased the clouds of witnesses who made them, or those wannabe fake radicals and renegades whose activism somehow keeps the master's house fully intact. Just pause and think. How do we go from a Thurgood Marshall to a Clarence Thomas? Genuine autonomy and moral leadership here require not merely acting within the boundaries of dominant frameworks, but cultivating alternative modes of thinking, relating, and resisting. Take it from me, true moral agency is most authentic when it draws from the lived experiences, epistemologies, and solidarities among those of us historically excluded from shaping the moral landscape. During a very enlightening and empowering visit to Accra, Ghana, my husband and I observed that nestled in the heart of West Africa, at the foundation of every house of worship, storehouse, or residential house, there was a cornerstone marked with a symbol that would let you know the people who lived there, the principles they carried, and the very purpose that they were to carry out. Not like our curb appeals, gated communities, and manufactured laws that people like us, who they're trying to deport, keep. No, these cornerstones made you. They made you adjust your perspective, position yourself, and let you know that they had marked their territory by knowing a home that will have any legacy must be marked by this cornerstone. Stones that speak and cry out, even when its owners are long gone. You see, cornerstones make, mark, and mandate that our houses as part of the African diaspora should not be cloaked in the emperor's embellishment, but with our authentic integrity and ethical landscape. Morehouse, too, has its own cornerstones, its own foundational pillars. As we speak of those cornerstones that make or mark our houses, I'm mindful of the familiar saying, you can always tell a Morehouse man, but you can't tell him much. This saying circulates with equal parts humor and reverence that carry a deeper truth. A Morehouse man carries a distinctive sense of identity and purpose shaped by a tradition of academic rigor, moral formation, and collective uplift. Furthermore, the saying signifies that Morehouse experiences and produces leaders who are at once self-assured and demonstratively oh so proud and deeply committed to the values of their community. The second half, but you can't tell him much, suggests that a Morehouse man is not easily swayed by external pressures. Rather than cave into the world that regards the single illustrative black male institution as the jailhouse, these black men's chests literally swell when they proclaim that it's Morehouse ties and brotherly love and excellence that binds them and not the master's chains. A Morehouse man's convictions are shaped by a community that instills dignity, moral responsibility, and a lifelong commitment to justice. He listens, but he is not led astray. He thinks for himself, but he stands within a larger tradition of service. Even former President Barack Obama invoked this adage during his 2013 commencement address here, playfully acknowledging the challenge of telling anything to a room full of men trained to think critically and lead boldly, black and beautifully. President Obama chose only to underscore the responsibility on Morehouse men to use their gifts as tools to serve those who stand at the margins of society, serving the last, the lost, and the least of those among us. So we consider the moral architecture of Morehouse. We can identify a number of cornerstones or foundational pillars. I will point to 4 persons as foundational pillars, each one a towering figure whose life and legacy continue to shape not only this institution, but black moral leadership in America and beyond. Howard Thurman, Benjamin Mays, Martin Luther King Jr., and Dean Lawrence Carter. These are not merely iconic history makers, you see. They represent instead 4 enduring ways of being, indicative of 4 distinct moral orientations that together produce what I would like to call Morehouse's ethical imagination. When I think about these men and how they represent the 4 enduring ways of being that were found and flourish here at Morehouse, I'm reminded of Thurman's mysticism, Mays's organization, King's righteousness, and Carter's enlightenment. The 4 moral orientations represented by each figure leans itself to the more, and what I would like to call the mores that serve as a vital core of this fine institution of higher learning. Each of these men cultivated a different dimension of human development, a way of building the kind of house that the master cannot demolish because it's not made of the master's materials. For those who might not recall, we observed this week that Howard Thurman was born on November 18, 1901, in Daytona, Florida. A child of the Jim Crow South, he rose to become one of the most influential religious thinkers of the 20th century, a minister, philosopher, mystic, theologian, poet, and spiritual activist whose work shaped movements for freedom, justice, equality, and dignity across the globe. His intellectual foundations, contemplative spirituality, and theology of social transformation positioned him as a critical conversation partner for figures such as Harry Emerson Fosdick, Paul Tillich, Reinhold Niebuhr, A.J. Muste, and Mahatma Gandhi, and as a mentor to Martin Luther King and a rising generation of civil rights activists. His service as a professor at Morehouse, dean of the chapel at both Howard University and Boston University, and co-founder of the Fellowship of All Peoples, the nation's first intentionally interracial interfaith congregation, made him a pioneer of ministerial innovation and spiritual activism. Thurman's early years at Morehouse were profoundly transformative and instilled in him the core belief that intellect could not be divorced from ethics or spiritual conviction. It was here that initial territory of his influence began to take shape, guided by the college's mission to produce men who not merely succeed personally, but contribute to a more just society. Thurman interpreted faith not as an escape from the world, but instead viewed it as an essential tool for overcoming oppression and injustice. This served as a theme in his most important and influential book, Jesus and the Disinherited. Now, Thurman's journey can be understood through a deeper reading of 1 Chronicles 4, 9 through 10, a scriptural passage that often has been called the prayer of Jabez. Now, let me remind us about something about Jabez. Although popularized by the get-rich-or-die-trying, dollar-hooping, cherry-picked prosperity, gospel-inspired eisegesis of the biblical passage, we must remember that Jabez was a man who, despite everything going against him, he stood out from the crowd. Although deployed in modern circles as a surefire, sanctified formula for attaining wealth and personal success, the text tells a very different story than as it's been branded. The church has lied on the text, so let me tell you a little bit of truth about what the Bible says. Jabez does not emerge in the biblical narrative because of wealth, talent, or noble birth, but because in the midst of earthly existence marked by pain, limitation, obscurity, he sought God with a spirit of sincerity and courage. Jabez prayed for a life enlarged, not for self-promotion, but for meaning, purpose, and faithful responsibility. In this respect, the narrative resonates not with the transactional religion of prosperity gospel, but with the spiritual formation that is rooted in a real investment and dependence upon God. With conviction, I argue that Howard Thurman would unequivocally challenge our recent individualistic and self-centered interpretations of Jabez's prayer. Thurman's prayer-centered approach, grounded in inward transformation, alignment with God's purpose, and dedication to serving the disinherited, stands in stark contrast to those limited interpretations. Thurman's profound theological perspective compels us to seek an expanded capacity for answering our divine calling. And here in that calling, Thurman believed that a true calling finds a true home. And a true home was not simply a physical structure, but a world and witness grounded in the eternal. As he wrote, a man must be at home somewhere before he can feel at home everywhere. For Thurman, scores of others at Morehouse, this was a sanctuary where young Black men could cultivate their sense of identity, dignity, scholarship, and moral leadership. Morehouse was a sanctuary where his own spiritual hunger could meet a community striving towards justice, a sanctuary where academic rigor fused with ethical purpose, and a sanctuary where the inward journey nourished the outward struggle. Returning to Morehouse in 1928 as professor of religion, his classroom became a space where contemplation met activism, and that inward journey was inseparable from public responsibility. You may have heard the saying, attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson. Quote, "The house is built of walls and beams. The home is built of love and dreams." This sentiment expresses what this place was for Thurman, and is a fundamental truth about human belonging. You might not recall Emerson, but perhaps Luther Vandross might excite you. In the way in which he added the emotional depth with his reading, in his rendition of "A house is not a home," suggesting that physical structures alone cannot create meaning. And then Luther pushes even further. A chair is not a house, and a house is not a home when there's no one there. So Howard Thurman lays a cornerstone of interior authority, the grounding of the soul. Thurman teaches that before we can speak truth to power, protest in the streets, or even form a coherent philosophy of liberation, we must possess an inner life that is anchored, undivided, uncolonized, and unafraid. He did not see spirituality as an escape from struggle, but as a furnace. Thurman believed that oppression's greatest threat was not to the body, but to the spirit, to one's capacity to dream, to hope, to resist, despair, and to refuse internalized oppression. His work insisted that the most radical act of a disinherited person can perform in their life is to cultivate and emphasize a spirit that refuses to be defined by fear, hatred, or deception. This interiority, then, is not introspection. It is the formation of moral clarity and spiritual resilience. Thurman's mysticism reminds us that movements built on rage will burn out, but movements rooted in deep interior conviction will endure. Another critical cornerstone is the sixth president of Morehouse College, Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays. Benjamin Mays and Howard Thurman shared a significant and multifaceted relationship that evolved over several decades. Both men were born in the 19th century in Jim Crow South, and their direct experiences with systemic oppression and racial violence fueled their lifelong pursuit of social justice and equality. Their relationship was rooted in their connections at not only Morehouse, but also Howard University, and their shared commitment to civil rights and spiritual leadership, and shared values regarding education, character, and activism. All three were deeply shaped by both of their experiences growing up during segregation, which instilled in them a profound understanding of racial injustice and having a rich solidarity in Black self-determination. But it was the Black church tradition that was central for both of them, a foundational force in their lives, providing an underpinning of deep Christian faith. Both were Baptist pastors, articulate speakers, and early proponents of the philosophy of nonviolent resistance, which they practiced before Martin Luther King Jr. even rose to prominence. Their combined influence profoundly shaped the ethos of Morehouse and the broader civil rights movement. They served in a way as key mentors to King, who was a student at Morehouse during Mays' presidency and later studied at Boston University, an institution that would eventually be transformed by Thurman's imprint. Conversely, as legend has it, many of King's closest confidants and lieutenants attested to the fact that during his countless travels for nearly 13 years as a nonviolent leader in the civil rights struggle, King carried 2 books in his briefcase, always for guidance and inspiration. One, of course, was the Bible, and the other was Thurman's Jesus and the Disinherited. Hopefully, I did not have to go into too much detail about the Bible's role in King's life, but it was a staying power for King like it was for Mays in provoking a moral imagination. Mays embraced his own interpretation of the Black social gospel, in which he sought to apply Christian principles to societal problems with a keen eye on Jesus' humanity, ethics, and actions in confronting social injustice. He was clearly a proponent for a more direct style of activism that was more traditional and organizational in nature. As an educator, Benjamin Mays advocated personal excellence, making him more than a teacher, but even a moral craftsman. For Mays, dignity and discipline were inseparable. Excellence was not elitism, but ethical obligation. In his own words, it was not failure, but low aim that we should understand as sin. And in that single line, he distilled the moral responsibility of education. Mays was the pragmatic institutional builder, organizational genius, who used the framework of the social gospel and multiracial democracy to argue for immediate social change. While Thurman was the mystic philosopher who provided the necessary inner spiritual resistance and soul force for the movement. Thurman's influence reverberates most powerfully through his impact in King's life. In the mid-1930s, Benjamin Mays and Howard Thurman traveled to India, and they met Gandhi. And there, when they met Gandhi, they felt an affirmation in their belief in the power of nonviolence, rooted in Jesus' teaching of love, redemptive suffering, and turning the other cheek. More than inspiration and motivation, Gandhi offered to these two men a method called satyagraha, demonstrating how oppressed people could use disciplined, sacrificial, nonviolent resistance to confront injustice. It has been said that Gandhi predicted that through African Americans, not his own people, that the pure message of nonviolence would reach the world. This encounter planted seeds that would later shape the philosophy and activism of what becomes a cornerstone in Martin Luther King Jr. Thurman's work helped shape King's vision of the beloved community, the spiritual and the social ideal of a world reconciled through justice, peace, and human dignity. Thurman insisted that individuals must discover an inner sanctuary of peace before they can ever externalize peace. He did this both at the Interfaith Peace Chapel, and King understood it as his core nonviolent philosophy of resistance. Their shared commitment to search for the common good and to confront the radical tension between good and evil with spiritual integrity forms a continuous line of moral leadership. This virtual mentorship led to the development of King of what he named the beloved community and ultimately the World House concept. In King's final book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, he introduced the metaphor. We have inherited a large house, he said, a great world house in which we have to live together, black and white, Easterner and Westerner, a family unduly separated in ideas, culture, and interests, who, because we can never again live apart, we must learn somehow to live with each other in peace. In the life of Martin Luther King Jr., the third pillar of Morehouse is laid. While Thurman gives us spiritual depth and Mays gives us discipline formation, King demonstrates what it means to put both into public motion. His spirituality was not sentimental, nor was it purely doctrinal. It was disciplined, prophetic, and it demanded great personal risk. King's commitment was not to religion as an institution, but to the ethical demands of the gospel. Jesus was justice to him. Heaven affirmed human dignity, and peace should be for all. And that does not mean that it's about the absence of conflict, but it's for the persistence of righteousness. A commitment of those so-called, like King, meant that you had to have the faith that would take form wherever you went, whether it was in the streets, whether it was at the policy table, whether it was in protest or in solidarity, if necessary, at the cross of sacrifice. Here we arrive at the pillar of enlightenment, vis-a-vis ethical intelligence, best articulated in our lifetime by Dean Lawrence Edward Carter Sr. While the world rushes towards artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data-driven everything, Carter reminds us that without ethical intelligence, the world becomes not more advanced, but more dangerous. The world becomes more dim, devastating, and delusional. And as he has embodied with his 4-year engagement as a young student, and now 46 years as a griot, and the college reminds us, as this founding dean resembles in its own motto that focuses on bringing the light into the world, et facta et lux, and there was light. As Dean Carter says, ethical intelligence is the light of God. It is the ability to discern what is right when righteousness is neither profitable nor popular. And unless it is the light of that God who builds the house, those of us who labor in vain build it. It is this courage to think critically without becoming cynical, to hold power without abusing it, and to exercise leadership without losing compassion. Ethical intelligence becomes, as Dean Carter has embodied, the capacity to evaluate not only what can be done, but what should be done. And when you do that, you become the one that stands out. It is the moral wisdom we need in the boardrooms, classrooms, legislators, pulpits, and even laboratories. Ethical intelligence asks, what good is brilliance without conscience? What good is innovation without justice? What good is leadership without service? Today, we celebrate Howard Thurman's life, his focus on spiritual capacity, moral responsibility, and institutional possibility. Through his presence and legacy, Morehouse College itself has been transformed into a home where intellectual pursuit, spiritual depth, and social justice meet, shaping leaders who continue to answer the call to serve a world still yearning to be free. So in closing, I say to you, as King did, you have inherited a large house, a great world house. So be reminded when you man up with your Morehouse pride and make your way in this world. Be reminded and inscribe it upon your hearts the words of Luke 12:48. For to him to whom much is given, from him much will be required. And to him whom has been committed so much, of him we will ask all the more. We need you because we need Morehouse. So let the light of the mores of Thurman's mysticism, Mays' organizing, King's righteousness, and Dean Carter's enlightenment so shine through you and before others that they may see you coming, because they know that you have good works in building Morehouse, but not just for yourself, but for the good of us all. And it's in the words of Howard Thurman, I leave with you this benediction. Go your own way. Do your own thing. But do it in such a way that your God nor your people will be ashamed for having made you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for your attentiveness. It is our tradition today to have the executive committee of the chapel assistants take the tripod wreath to the Thurman obelisk and place it in front of his bar relief on the front. You may do that now. I invite Elijah Gatlin from the Glee Club to come forward and to lead us in the singing of Dear O Morehouse.
Dear old Morehouse, dear old Morehouse, we have pledged our lives to thee, and will ever, yea, forever, give ourselves in loyalty, true forever, true forever, to old Morehouse may we be, so to bind each son the other into ties more brotherly. Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit, make us steadfast, honest, true, to old Morehouse